The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, Children's Health Defense. I hope that you're well wherever you are in the world and healthy. And today it is my great pleasure and honor to have here as our guest Jeffery Tucker, the president of the Brownstone Institute, an institute with which we've done several projects in the past and look forward to working with in the future. Jeffery, welcome.
Well, it's good to be here, Mary. Thank you for inviting me.
So I wanted to start, I don't know that we've really had the chance to explore with our viewers the story of Brownstone, how it was created. Start us with the Great Barrington Declaration and how that sort of led to Brownstone.
Well, it did. Great Barrington Declaration came out. I organized the event that led to it. The event itself was something of a failure. Hardly anybody showed up. So the scientists behind the organizing that arrived for the event that I put together decided they had to make some kind of statement to instantiate this or to make a statement concerning the lockdowns. You remember, this is before the shots had come out, right? So it was just a combination of business closures and social distancing and all the methods that were being used, presumably to deal with the COVID crisis, that were actually being used to prepare to get the population panicked so that they would accept the shot. It took me a couple of years to figure that one out. The declaration came out, and then things didn't improve. We had hoped that they were going to improve under the Biden administration, but they didn't. They got worse. The vaccine came out, the mandates showed up, the lockdowns are still going on, businesses are still shut, people are still discouraging from meeting with their families for holidays. The catastrophe just kind of went on, and the censorship was growing during this time. The other thing, Mary, that shocked me was the way in which my normal ideological friends, the people I thought that I could rely on, they couldn't understand what was happening, and they were not even protesting of what was happening, and mostly just kind of shrunk back and let everything unfold, even making excuses for things like mask mandates and stuff. And I just realized that I had all these new friends that I'd never met before. I mean, you among them. And I was anxious to do two things by founding Brownstone. One is to provide a mechanism for assembling a new community of academics and scholars and journalists and attorneys who needed sanctuary during a time of purging that was taking place in academia and in science generally. They needed a home. Sometimes in history there are times when you need sanctuaries for great and important thinkers. But there was also, on my part, a desire to figure out why I had not anticipated these lockdowns and what led to them, and why is it that the normal categories of left and right didn't seem to be very predictive of a person's or an institution's positions, and also why so many institutions were completely silent on the subject, including, of course, all of mainstream media that were cheering for the lockdown. So it was all very confusing. So partially out of selfish reasons, I wanted to bring a bunch of smart people together to figure out what was going on in the world. And the result was Brownstone Institute, which has a primary interest in infectious disease and its mitigation because of the circumstances under which we were founded. But we also deal with topics like censorship, rising technocracy, agency capture by industry, the power of big pharma, the power of big business generally, which are some of the very similar concerns to CHD, actually.
Yeah.
And CHD predates Brownstone.
Yeah.
And I don't think I knew anything about CHD.
Yeah.
But now it's been a wonderful thing because we actually function together as this wonderful community, Brownstone CHD and children and all these organizations. There are dozens of these organizations. it does feel like it's a kind of a new social, at least for me, new
Yeah,
social cultural movement dedicated entirely to medical freedom
yeah.
and health freedom, which is in many ways the foundation of freedom itself. Um, so it's been a very fruitful endeavor for me intellectually, even if it's been a catastrophic time for the country.
Well, I'm so grateful to Brownstone. I've certainly been privileged to come to many Brownstone events and to speak. And I think you have created, in my view, Jeffrey, kind of the new university, which is largely online, but not exclusively. And so it's both the opportunity to brainstorm with other aligned people, not necessarily of the same views, but trying to understand the world that we're in because it's so transformed, and
Yeah.
also creating this sense of community, both through your supper clubs and through your retreats. And I just am personally very grateful because I came out of academia 17 years worth before ending up at Children's Health Defense. And some of that excitement and ferment and collaboration and community that is a part of the academic culture just evaporated for me in an institutional mainstream way. And so it's been a really wonderful sort of.
One of the things that has been really very nice is that we do have this network of supper clubs, as you mentioned. I think we're going on something like 20 supper
Fantastic.
clubs coast to coast. So most nights of most days, there is a supper club somewhere in
Yeah,
the country,
great.
and that's worked very well with CHD because we've
Yeah,
relied on your network that you had already
yeah,
assembled, and that's been growing alongside of ours. So we cross-pollinate ideas and put these
yeah.
communities together.
It's
It's a
great.
really so a person can pay $50, $60, get a great meal, meet a lot of friends that are already
Friends
sort of
in their neighborhood, right?
in the
Friends in
neighborhood.
their community, people that they
Yeah.
can, form other connections with, which is so valuable because I think so much of the experience for all of us during COVID was this isolation, and the former ties, like you're saying, somehow for most of us, like they shifted drastically. So the supper clubs have been really fantastic. And I look forward, we work together on the COVID Justice Initiative, covidjustice.org. You drafted a wonderful resolution that people have signed up for, and we hope that the Senate will carry this forward. We're not done with a true reckoning from COVID yet, for sure. But
Yeah, and we have to have it, or else I don't
yeah,
think we
we
can really
have to, or
move.
it'll happen again.
Yeah.
We can't give up on this as much as it's already too long. It's still worth doing. But there's a certain irony, Jeffrey, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that at the beginning of Brownstone, there was a sort of an unwritten rule that you weren't going to touch vaccines. Is that right?
That is true. I no,
And
that
I
is
kind of laughed ruefully of like, let's see how long that one's going to last.
yeah, not long, right? I mean, it's either weeks or maybe a couple of months. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, we weren't going to touch the issue because it's something about which I didn't really know, and my primary focus was on lockdowns and violations of civil liberties during that time. And everybody warned me this: just whatever you do, don't talk about vaccines. I said, yeah, okay. Didn't have strong convictions about it, but that didn't last long because it emerged that the reason for the lockdowns was actually to prepare the population for the shots. Something that took me a long time to figure out, actually. Like you probably knew it in the beginning, but the main reason the Great Barrington Declaration was controversial is that it mentioned that natural immunity would make the main contribution to getting through the pandemic.
Of course.
And that's why they had to censor the document. I mean, so the whole point was to roll out the shots and get
Yeah.
the population vaccinated. So yeah, that didn't last long. Right then, and now, like you, and I think wrongly, the term anti-vax is applied
Yeah,
to us.
it's it's a ridiculous term. But and do you mention natural immunity? It's so interesting, Jeffrey, because I did have COVID pretty early on and developed natural immunity. And so I was able to travel freely in Europe because at least in Europe, they actually acknowledged that natural immunity existed. And in this country, ridiculously, there was no even acknowledgement that there was natural immunity and forcing some people who had natural immunity to get the shots at great personal risk. I mean, what happened to us all was so unfathomable from a civil rights perspective, censorship perspective, but medical perspective as well.
Oh, it's anti-science. Talk
Yeah,
about that. We're called anti-scientific. By the way, all the people who have ever resisted vaccine mandates have always been called anti-science, just in the history of Commonwealth countries and the U.S. So
yeah,
that's just very common. But the actual anti-science is on these people who think that the only
absolutely.
path to human health is through vaccination. And especially this shot was especially implausible because it was using a new
A
technology
brand new
that.
technology.
Yeah, that the
Insane.
FDA had rejected on
Yeah.
grounds that the safety profile had never been proven, and suddenly the entire population was being jabbed with these things, and we didn't know what the effects of them would be. And then, pretty early on, it turned out they didn't stop
New.
transmission. Okay, well, that means they have no public health benefit. So they
Right.
may have a private benefit, but no
May.
public health benefit. And then it turned out that that safety profile was
Terrible.
the worst
Worst
shot
ever. Worst
ever been
ever.
approved.
Yeah. Worst.
And so then it turns out the private benefit, largely vanishes, if not entirely. And so how can you mandate a shot like that? I mean, it's there was a commercial motivation there, but there was also a kind of a political purge going on. Like, we don't want citizens who resist
Mhm.
what the government says, what public health says. You don't even have citizenship rights if you're going to say no to these shots. That was the message. So they drove uh,
Yeah.
dissident students out of universities.
Yeah.
Almost every university in this
Yeah.
country had vaccine mandates, and also faculty. They were purging
Yeah.
faculty left and right. And Mary, this is still going on, right? I mean, every
Yeah.
day I hear of another
Yeah.
scientist having
Dissident
written it.
doctors. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's one of the dimensions. I don't think we fully understand yet all of what was going on behind the whole COVID project. But certainly you're right. It was a purge throughout society of those that were disobedient. And yet the silver lining is that those of us who are disobedient are infinitely healthier than those who took these shots. I mean, the
That's
tragedy is that people who, out of altruism or obedience or some combination, or just
distrust.
sort of pragmatism, they've suffered and some have died.
Yeah,
So
and the purges are ongoing. They're more subtle now,
yeah,
but
I agree.
the head of Brown University's
I
cancer
know,
research
I
department
know.
was just removed yesterday
Was
because
he? Dr. Algieri was removed.
he was
Wow, it's
removed
outrageous. Yeah,
because he had co-authored a paper, a very you know, s- careful scientific
right.
paper that was examining this and demonstrating the relationship of a COVID vaccination with rising incidence of cancer. Okay, so but just putting those two words together in a paper caused a month of DDoS attacks on the journal that ran the paper. And when I last saw him in Washington, he looked very
Sure.
flustered and disoriented and confused about all the attacks on him. And then just yesterday, he was removed as the head of the cancer center. A very mainstream, very
Yeah,
respectable
Wafik Al-Diri.
scientist. He said the wrong thing one
Right.
time, and not even as a matter of opinion, but
No.
it's a very careful paper
Yeah.
on the empirical evidence that they
Right.
have. And next thing you know, he's purged. So that's the power of the pharmaceutical industry at work.
Well, and I think we saw that with so many. We saw that with Dr. Peter McCullough. We've seen it with earlier people, Dr. Paul Thomas, Dr. Ken Stoller, but we certainly saw it during Dr. Pierre Corey. They speak out and doing with science, right? They're not
Yeah,
just shooting off their mouth. They're saying, this is what the evidence shows. This is
yeah.
what's working. This is what's not working. And they are blackballed. And this is gets us to this article that I wanted to discuss with you, Jeffrey, because we, I think, can say with great certainty that the narrative around the efficacy and safety of vaccination would not exist but for the censorship of unfavorable information and the propaganda that vaccines are safe and effective, vaccines save lives, which is demonstrably not true in many, many cases. So this was a fantastic article that came out at the end of December. How long has industry captured vaccine regulation? And I have to say, Jeffrey, for me, and I've been studying this a long time, there were new revelations that I thought were really, really important about the history of regulation in this area. So tell us a little bit about this article.
Del Bigtree said the same thing, by the way, that when I talked about it, that he had never heard this stuff before. And it's just right. It's right there in the history books. But yeah, people don't know about it. So let's just kind of, if you wouldn't mind, I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but let's go back to the beginning with Edward Jenner's discovery of cross immunity. He didn't discover it. The existence of cross immunity had been known for centuries before.
Right.
Cross immunity, what I mean by that is the ability of the pathogenic matter from cowpox to be effective immunization against smallpox. Okay, so it had been known for a long time before then. The normal practice of eliciting an immune response from some sort of exogenous intervention was called variolation.
Right.
But that was not cross immunity. What you were doing was taking dead smallpox cells and blowing them up in the nose or rubbing them on incisions in the arm. There is evidence that variolation goes back to the 6th century.
Yeah, Indus Valley, absolutely. I mean, this was the slaves brought this from Africa to the United States. This was not a new technology.
Not a new technology. So Edward Jenner's somehow he was a country doctor who eventually became like the surgeon to the king, incredibly. Captured all the headlines with his invention of vaccination in 1796, and for reasons I don't entirely understand. It was codified as the great achievement of science. I mean, like the perfect embodiment of what the Enlightenment means, because he used testing, he used evidence, he used an empirical experiment, and everybody just got swept up in the idea just almost immediately. And Thomas Jefferson, who's a personal hero of mine, without any direct evidence of anything, writes Edward Jenner a letter saying, "Oh, history will always remember you as the great man who's applied Enlightenment values and saved humanity." It's like a little bit over-valorized without something that hadn't really been well tested. And even at that time, plenty of British doctors found this practice to be unsafe as compared with variolation. So there was a huge debate within the UK scientific community about this, and a lot of books were published in the early 1800s by partisans of variolation that said, look, this vaccination stuff is deadly. And they went around the country chronicling vaccine injury and death. And I have no doubt that they were right about this. But for some reason, vaccination, just was sort of subsidized by the fashions of the time, because it was just declared to be science, and no empirical evidence to the contrary really seemed to matter. So anyway, there was a big scramble on pretty early on that everybody wanted a part of Jenner's great innovation, and so in the U.S. there was a guy named James. Named James Smith, who, as far as we know, is just some sort of huckster, right? But he was importing cowpox and smallpox pathogens and assembling them in his laboratories. And I like to think of him as the nation's first Anthony Fauci. There's in the history of all this stuff, there's always always an Anthony Fauci
Yeah,
who
absolutely.
proclaims himself to be the science, the key expert in vaccination. He's got the stuff in his lab. He lobbies. Industry relies on him because he's a compelling figure to persuade politicians. This keeps happening. So
Yep.
James Smith, who was born in 1771, died in 1841, went to President James Madison and said, "Listen, I've got all the stuff you need to vaccinate the population." Lobbied for it, and there was already a vaccination industry at the time. Lobbied James Madison to pass an act to encourage vaccination. And James Madison did it. Now, think about this, Mary. This is a tiny government. It
Yeah,
just come into
yeah,
existence, right?
yeah,
It was still unstable. They'd
yeah,
never regulated any product. The
yeah,
federal government had no interest in any products that we had total freedom. Anybody could do anything they wanted. Oh, but Madison gets persuaded to pass the very first act in American history that pertained to a consumer-based product that happens to be, what do you know, vaccination. So the Act to Encourage Vaccination was passed in 1813, and what it said was that it said taxpayers would pay for vaccines free for anybody who wanted them, and it mandated that the post office deliver them to the person who asked for them and not resell them or divert them
amazing.
or whatever. So already we have.
Yeah,
So this is it. So there has never been a free market in
right,
vaccination in this country ever.
right,
It's never been treated as a normal
right.
consumer product like a
Consumer product.
hamburgers
Yeah,
or bottled water,
right,
somebody else like that. No,
yeah.
it's always benefited from some sort of intervention.
Government
But
intervention. Yeah,
and so, sure enough, there was a wave of vaccine injury, and it got worse and worse and worse until 1821. There's a terrible tragedy. Wouldn't you know, James Smith and his glorified laboratories mixed up live samples of smallpox and cowpox, and killed a bunch of people. There were more than 60 people that died just immediately. But just keep in mind, though, there these 60 people that were seriously injured and 10 deaths all at once that received public attention in a time without X and Facebook.
right,
It was
right.
reported in the newspapers, causing outrage because it tapped into a growing sense that these products are
Yeah,
unsafe.
safe. Right.
And so they couldn't stand it anymore. So Congress began to investigate this guy, James Smith, and were looking at his finances, where they were accusing him of personal corruption, of payoffs from industry, that it wasn't really an objective scientist. He was only using science as a cover for his own personal scams. He was outraged. There were hearings in Congress. He was proclaiming his innocence, whatever. Finally, Congress couldn't stand it anymore. And in 1822, they repealed the entire act. They said, "All right, down with that. We're not going to have this. This guy's a jerk." Like I say, he was Fauci at the time,
Right, right.
glorified and heralded as a great genius, and then died in
Thrown out.
total
Yeah,
disgrace. And Congress acted and got rid of James Madison's catastrophic act to encourage vaccination. So, I mean, it's like the same history over and over
over
again.
and over.
And there it stood for some years until the 1830s. Andrew Jackson decided he was going to vaccinate the Indians. Now, I don't know exactly what happened there. We have terrible records. We don't know. Of course, the industry says, "Oh, it was glorious. It saved all the Indians." Yeah, I don't know about that. But in any case, no normal American wanted these products. The entire industry was dead, so they had to like experiment on the Native Americans, right?
Wow.
Well, now you have to bump forward to the Civil War. Now, you'll notice something is interesting about this, Mary. There's this, in American history anyway, anytime there's a war, you get disease panic. And when
Sure.
you have disease panic, everybody's looking for the magic elixir
Yeah,
of vaccination to protect them from smallpox outbreaks.
yeah,
This is why a major reason why James Madison bit with
yeah.
Smith's pitch was because of the War of 1812. So now you have the breakout of the U.S. Civil War, and armies on both sides mandated not variolation, but vaccination for their troops, leading to a tremendous cataclysm of injuries. And in my article, I have a lot of detail about the sheer number of people that were harmed and died from injuries. A major problem, and from that period was that they would go to the military hospitals and people who had died of smallpox and scrape off the scabs and mix up their own vaccination potions, and then cut open the arms of healthy soldiers and rub them with the stuff. And what they did was they spread syphilis. They spread syphilis throughout all the troops this way because, like, how stupid this is. Also, a typical thing you see in the history of infectious diseases is people think that the cause of death is the only pathogenic matter that would remain in their bodies, rather than considering that they might have had a lot of other diseases too. Including syphilis.
Right.
So the spreading of syphilis, both in northern troops and southern troops. So after that, vaccination, after the war ended, vaccination once again went into decline. But the industry rose up again based on disease fears, and by the end of the 19th century, the industry had grown in power and vaccination, and they started adding new shots, diphtheria and tetanus, right? So, but now, this to me is where the story gets extremely interesting. Now the vaccine industry had a new theory to justify the injury to the population. What they said was, the purpose of these shots is to save the overall health of the whole population. So we need maximum number of people to be vaccinated, and inevitably there will be some side effects,
Right.
some
but
injuries.
It's for the herd. It's for the population.
It's for the
right?
population and the
greater
herd.
good, Jeffrey.
Right. So they had this utilitarian framework now. So, so what happens here, Mary, it's very important, because in the 1880s, both in the UK and the US, you had a new emphasis on public health.
Yeah.
Now, the idea of public health is that we have a commons that we all share together, and that we all benefit from cleanliness of these commons. So
water,
we need
air, right?
clean water, clean air, and clean food. And so we should all strive, and better hygiene, right? So this was considered public health. Well, vaccination wanted to sneak into this apparatus. So this is weird, because clean water benefits everybody. Good food and healthy food, fresh food benefits everybody. Sanitation is great for the whole community. Vaccination is different. They had to use a utilitarian calculation. They said, we're going to have to break some eggs, but you'll get an omelet out of it, right? So they were sneaking into the public health. It was never legitimately part of public health in any moral, philosophical, or even just intuitive sense. It was a completely different product, but they snuck in the back door through this, by carrying around this new philosophical package called utilitarianism. So, of course, the same darn thing happens all over again. There's a wave of injuries and deaths. Now, keep in mind that there's far more injury and death than has ever been reported, because the news media is not very good.
Absolutely.
If they're isolated incidents, are never recorded as deaths from vaccines, and if they're not reported, nobody knows about. The record keeping was terrible. But if you had a slew of deaths all at once, the newspapers would suddenly report on it. And this happened in 1901, where there were 11 deaths from these contaminated batches of inevitably contaminated batches, and people were just outraged, and you got a wave of a non-compliance. You forget these vaccines. We don't want to have anything to do with them. So here's the amazing thing about this. So by now you had this large industry. They went to the government and they said, look, we've got a problem. Everybody hates our product. They think it's unsafe. Okay. You need to you need to regulate us. You need to crack down on us to get rid of the bad actors who are distributing
Right.
unsafe
So bad
products.
apples, right? The industry is good. It's just those small fry, they're the problem.
That's right. And the result was the Biologics Control Act of 1901, which, if anybody even knows about it, they think it was the federal government cracking down on a corrupt industry to
Not at all.
guarantee the safety of products.
Yeah.
Actually, and I have all the evidence in my article, that it was the industry itself
Right.
that pulled every string in the Senate and in the Congress and with the president to get that thing passed to shore up public confidence. So I find this utterly fascinating because you ask the average really well-informed person, what's the first consumer product in this country that came to be regulated by an agency in Washington? They will tell you it was the meat packers,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
1904. Well, that's a similar story. I mean,
Right.
the meat packing industry lobbied for that
Yeah.
to show, because the public had turned against
Right.
meat packing. I mean, but that was the meat industry that was looking for government to certify it. So now meat got less safe after being regulated than it was before.
And it's still the legacy today, right? Our colleagues, Meryl Nass and others, are still fighting for small farmers to be able to slaughter cattle or livestock on their farms. In other words, this shadow has lasted over 100 years in the meatpacking industry. And
And it's still with us, right? But
right,
but it turns out that 3 years before the meatpacking industry, we got the Biologics
right.
Control Act, which is that
Yeah.
did the same thing to vaccines,
Same.
arguably made them less safe
Yeah.
than
Oh,
ever, and cartelized the industry, because now you have high costs
right.
of compliance
Right.
with
Yeah.
regulations, so that now only the big players
Right.
within the biologic industry. Now, what was so the entire industry was thrilled by this. Now, I went back to prepare for this article. I read all the pharmacological journals that were coming out in 1901 to 1902, because I wanted to find evidence to prove
Yeah.
my point, that the industry actually wanted to be regulated.
Right.
But in the course of this reading, Mary, I found the most remarkable thing. I just could never have imagined it. They These people were and I'm sorry to say this, but they were insane. They believed, and it was commonly believed in presidential addresses of the American Biologics, Society, all these things in their journals.
Yeah.
They believed that vaccination was going to be the path through which they would have eternal life. That they thought that
Yeah.
um, that they could achieve, they could conquer death.
Yeah.
So these people, it was like the first transhumanists.
It's
Were all,
transhumanism, right? I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
they're
well, the
all
fountain of
vaccinated.
youth. This is not a new idea.
Right.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I would
It's
love
fascinating. And then,
to.
you can bump forward. And
Yeah,
the next thing I just wanted to mention very quickly is the Jacobson decision
yeah,
of 1905. And
yeah.
that was when mandates got through.
Really
That's what
blessed.
the
Yeah,
yeah, and a very wicked decision that we hope to get repealed at some point. So
yeah,
here we are, and then it just gets worse. At each stage, what you find is the heavy hand
yeah,
of the industry
yeah,
working with government
yeah.
to dislodge the forces of the market,
Right.
right? Which
It's always been free of the market forces. That's the most remarkable thing, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that's the bottom line, is that this
yeah.
industry has never really been subject to a
To market
normal
pressures.
to
Yeah.
market pressures,
And
competitive pressures, or responsive
I'm
to
and
consumer
when you
suspicion.
It's extraordinary. And so you talk about here, Park Davis was one of the early ones. It's now part of Pfizer, right? Think about, cars,
I
think about
forgot to mention that
refrigerators, think
part.
about light,
Yeah,
think about light fixtures, think about computers, think about if there'd been no innovation for over 100 years. And that's what vaccines are. Literally,
yeah.
through these monopoly forces and government mandates, there's been no innovation. I am not a fan of vaccines. I think they're conceptually flawed. But you could imagine that over 125 years, we might have actually come up with a lot safer vaccines if you wanted them, had innovation not been completely stymied by these monopolistic, government coercive policies.
Yeah, you say over 100 years. I mean, I think we could take it all the way back to Madison's Act to Encourage Vaccination of 1813. Really, it goes
Okay.
way back. The only innovation that happened in the 19th century was the injection over the incisions in the arms. But
Well,
other
and
than that,
making combination shots, Jeffrey, making it much worse. Seriously,
yeah,
much worse.
that's right.
But
So
anyway,
Mary, my theme, and I think it's a good one. You know, people say, "Well, you're an anti-vaxxer." It's like, well, uh, no. If I don't, um, what I would like to see is that this industry be subjected to a normal market test. If consumers don't want the product, they should be free to reject it.
of course,
Now, is the industry sustainable
no, it's
under this
not, Jeffrey.
condition? I
But
mean,
we could, I
it
don't
would
think
be
so.
nice to find out. You
Right.
know, I
Oh,
mean,
I completely agree. I mean, market forces, no coercion, right? This is, and this should be based on, people should have truthful information on which to make decisions, which they don't have today because of
and
this.
we need to get rid of the subsidies and the agency protection, the agency
Yeah.
capture. The agency capture, I mean, we use this term capture, but in many ways, the industry's founded the agencies, right?
I
The
totally, that's the key point in your article, Jeffrey, is it's not the government regulating industry. It's the industry using government as a front. Oh, government, come regulate us, because they know that they can control the government and the regulators. So it's a very, and you point out, it's the meat packers, it's biologics, we know it's telecom, it's every other major industry. This is what they do.
This
And
is
so,
why the industry is so shocked when RFK got to HHS and started appointing people throughout the FDA and NIH and CDC and said, "I want you to separate industry. I want you to eliminate this corrupt system." Where there's conflicts of interest everywhere. Well, the agencies themselves have a historical memory. They exist for the industry. That's
exactly,
what that's
exactly,
all they've ever
exactly,
done. They're there
exactly.
to cover up
They are,
injury and
yeah,
death
and
and to
inherently
subsidize the
anti-market,
industry.
right? These agencies are inherently anti-market. Don't let people decide for themselves. We will regulate and we will tell people what to do. Jeffrey, we could talk for hours and we will
It's
have you back. I would love to talk about the Lester method. That's a really interesting topic. But thank you so much for coming on today. So important, so fascinating, and we'll have you back.
I love to talk about this, and I'm honored that you invited me on, and it was a pleasure to be here with you, Mary. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
My name is Lisa Rankin. I'm a family physician.
I'm Dr. Judy Mikovits.
My name is Dr. Patricia Ryan.
So I'm Paul Thomas.
I'm a professor of medicine at West Virginia University School of Medicine.
I'm Cornelia Franz.
And you are a pediatric doctor.
I am a pediatric doctor.
And how long have you been practicing as a pediatrician?
A really long time, over 30 years.
I'm Cami Benton.
Jane Orient. I'm an internist in Tucson, Arizona.
I'm Dr. Ramon Ramos. I'm a pediatrician here in Savannah, Georgia.
I'm an emergency room physician.
My name is James Neuenschwander. I'm a physician in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
My name is Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I've been researching problems associated with vaccines since September of 2000. I put well over 20,000 hours of my own time into researching these problems with vaccines.
Dr. Bob Zajac. I'm a board-certified pediatrician.
My name is Tatiana Buhanic. My qualifications, first of all, I'm a mom, and I believe that's my most important qualification, and I just happen to have a PhD in immunology in addition to that.
We couldn't believe the medical profession as they started to come to the bus.
It took a lot for those people to stand up and talk. I mean, they've seen what happens to doctors and scientists who've taken this issue on and who've been destroyed.
Doctors, nurses, people with the top of the top qualifications in the medical world.
And the story they've been told by their colleagues, by public health, by their pharmaceutical industry sponsored medical education was in fact a grand lie.
So when you first started out to be a doctor, what kind of training did you get on vaccines?
Honestly, I don't remember very much conversation at all.
We were just taught that they help prevent
disease.
We were told on our rotations that vaccines were safe and effective. Here's the schedule.
We are not taught what's in those vaccines. We are just taught what the schedule is like.
Safe and effective, and they've saved millions of lives. We learned the schedule. We did not learn what was in them.
It was more philosophically vaccines than the science behind it, I guess, if you will.
As you know, medical doctors don't have a lot of training in vaccines.
If you are one of those people who knows more than doctors, that's fine, no vaccinations, but you're not allowed to go to the doctor anymore. Okay? Why would you even want to go to a doctor who knows less than you do?
It's amazing, but they didn't teach us very much.
Very little. Very little. And what you got basically was told, these are the things that you need to give to your patients.
It was just more about administration of the vaccines rather than the real effects and risks associated with them.
Here's the schedule. These are the saviors of mankind. They're safe, and you need to make sure everybody's vaccinated.
In the field of vaccines, everything is great, everything is safe and effective, everything has been determined. There is no need to go back and look at it again.
Just like everybody else, I have to go to the insert and look what's in it. I don't know what they put in vaccines.
And so I kind of thought that they were saline water and like bits of viruses and it, super safe.
Yeah, you learn about adjuvants and you learn about the immune system and how it works, but as far as what the vaccine actually does, and you never heard about the negative effect of a vaccine. Never.
Zero. None.
The whole argument of your doctor has done all this research. Well, if they've done it on their own, maybe.
Yeah. Well, since there was no discussion of there being anything bad about vaccines, and unless you spend some time on your own, investigating, you have the presumption that vaccines are good and that everyone should get them and that you should make sure that every child coming into your office is getting them on schedule or they're going to have some horrible illness.
So there wasn't any training. There wasn't any looking at side effects. There wasn't any of that. So nothing.
Would an immunologist be probably, of all the medical professions, someone that is near to being an expert?
I would say no one is an expert in vaccines, absolutely no
Parents
one. Because,
are, by the way.
Yes, because no one is being taught about vaccines in schools. And so basically in vaccine field, you really have to be a self-taught expert.
If doctors don't know about vaccines because they've had no training, then who are you going to trust? You have to trust the parents. You have to listen to the parents.
What are you going to do with this bus when you're done?
Well, whatever happens, the parents are going to take back their freedom. That's right. Parents are now in control.
Yes.
The right people.
That's right.
See all those hearts? Yeah. See those right there?
Yeah.
They are all for you.
All for me?
All of those hearts. Look at all the different colours coming up now.
The colours are coming up.
Every single one of those is for you.
Cool, isn't it?
Yeah, that's how much people love you.
They love me too.
They really do.
Yeah, baby, people love you. They love you a lot.
Want to bring a screening of Duty to Disobey to your community? It's simple to become a host. First, go to dutytodisobeyfilm.com. There you can watch the trailer, learn more about the film, and when you're ready, click the Be a Host button. Once you sign up, you'll be contacted by Bella, and she'll send you a host kit with everything you need and the next steps. The main thing we'll ask you to do is help us identify a potential local venue. This can be as simple as doing a quick Google search, or maybe you already have a place in mind. We're primarily looking for places like independent theaters, chiropractic offices, town halls, event centers, or other community gathering spaces. You'll just reach out to the venue to check availability, seating capacity, cost, and whether DVDs can be sold at the event. Once you've got that information, send it over to us and we'll take it from there. We'll work with the venue to secure the location, set up a ticketing page for your event, and handle the rest of the details and logistics. All you have to do is share the ticket link with your community, promote the event, and show up on the day of the screening to check in your guests. And here's something new this time. You can get paid for hosting. At your screening, you'll be able to sell DVDs of the film and earn $5 for every DVD sold. So if you want to bring Duty to Disobey to your community, head over to dutytodisobeyfilm.com. Click Be a Host, and we'll get you started. We can't wait to work with you. This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.